When a school bully targets a quiet black girl for weeks, he has no idea she's Denzel Washington's daughter, and what happens next leaves the entire school in shock. Westbrook High didn't look like a school, it looked like a resort. Rows of imported trees lined the parking lot, each one trimmed with the same precision as the blazers worn by its students. A stone fountain bubbled quietly in the quad, and every window sparkled like it had never seen a speck of dust. This was where old money met new ambition. On Monday morning, the campus buzzed with muted conversations and sneakerless footsteps. Students filed through the halls with espresso in one hand, their phones in the other. Backpacks didn't sag here, they accessorized. Laughter came in low, polished bursts. Everyone seemed to know their place, except one. Zariah walked in just after the first bell. Her uniform fit but didn't flaunt. Her black curls were tucked under a simple beanie she'd embroidered herself. No makeup, no jewelry, no tick-tock, ring light glow. Just a sketch pad under one arm and headphones she never wore in her ears. She didn't walk with urgency, but with intention, eyes forward, lips closed, spine straight, like she was trying not to take up too much space, but made you notice when she passed. Some kids whispered when she walked by. That's the new girl, right? She never talks to anyone. She doesn't even have Instagram. Nobody knew her last name. Nobody had seen her parents. But by the third week, they knew this much. She didn't try, not to fit in, not to be seen, not to play the game. She stepped into first period English, slipped into the back row like a ghost, and opened her notebook to a half-finished pencil sketch of a hand gripping a burning rope. The teacher didn't even look up. Most students didn't either. Except one, Chase Bennett. Front row, backward chair, eyes full of bored curiosity. He watched her with the same gaze a lion gives to something that doesn't run. And just like that, a quiet fuse had been lit. Not with an insult, not with a shove, just a look. But Zariah had seen enough looks in her life to know what they could turn into. She exhaled slowly and turned the page in her sketchbook. The fire hadn't started yet, but it was coming. Chase Bennett didn't run the school, he just acted like he did. Star quarterback, homecoming shoe-in. His name engraved on last year's student leadership trophy like it was a family heirloom. He had the kind of face that looked like it had been lit by golden hours since birth, and the charm to make teachers laugh at late homework instead of mark it down. But behind the charm was something else, something sharper. He was the kind of kid who didn't need to shove you into a locker to remind you of your place. He just had to smirk when you walked by, laugh a little too loud, whisper something just loud enough. He wasn't a villain in the comic book sense. He was worse. He was polite when adults were around, vicious when they weren't. And the second he saw Zariah in that back corner, head down, quiet, untouchable, he made a decision. She was going to be fun. At lunch, he leaned across the table to his friends, gesturing toward her. "Yo, why's the art department sitting at our table?" They laughed, not because it was funny, but because he was Chase. His friends always laughed. "She looks like she's sketching a crime scene," one of them said. "I think she's sketching your GPA," another added. Chase smiled, letting it roll, but he wasn't done. The next day, he accidentally knocked her sketch pad off her desk during passing period. "Oops," he said, his voice slick with fake sweetness. Zariah didn't flinch. She bent down, picked up her pad, and kept walking. Didn't look at him, didn't say a word. That silence, that calm, it wasn't weakness. But Chase mistook it for exactly that. He leaned against the locker beside hers the next day, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "You know, you might actually be cute if you smiled more." She looked at him then, just for a second, and that second was enough to say, "You picked the wrong one." But Chase didn't see it, not yet. All he saw was a quiet girl with paint on her backpack and no social capital. What he didn't see was the shadow behind her, and whose last name she carried. But he would, soon. It started small, a mistaken shoulder bump between classes that knocked her books to the floor, a cough that somehow always sounded like weirdo when she passed, a whisper that followed her into the library, the art room, even the lunch line. Zariah heard them. She always did. But she never reacted, not with words, not with glares. She simply adjusted her things, picked up what had been knocked down and moved on, like dust brushing off her sleeve, like none of it mattered. That drove Chase crazy. In art class, he waited until the teacher turned her back. He slid over to her workstation, picked up one of her charcoal sketches, and held it up for everyone to see. "Yo, is this a hand or a spider having a meltdown?" Laughter erupted. Not loud, not mean, just enough. The kind that sticks in your ribs. Zariah didn't look at him. She gently took the paper back, folded it once, then placed it in her binder. Still no words. Chase smirked like he'd scored a point, but inside something itched. He tried spreading rumors next, that she was homeschooled because she got kicked out of her last school, that she only got into Westbrook because someone pulled strings, that her parents were rich but weird and never showed their faces. By Wednesday, whispers trailed her like perfume. But Zariah didn't snap. She didn't cry. She didn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, she kept drawing, kept walking, kept moving through the noise like it didn't touch her. And Chase? He wasn't satisfied. Because the thing about people like him, they need you to flinch. They need the win. But Zariah wasn't playing the same game. She wasn't ignoring him. She was dismantling him. Silently. By Friday, Chase was tired of subtle. He wanted a scene, something that would finally crack that quiet shell. He wanted to see her angry, humiliated, human. So when the hallway cleared after fifth period and the lockers were mostly empty, he made his move. 2 cans of neon blue paint. One from the art room, one from a maintenance closet he knew was never locked. He unscrewed the lids with care, poured slowly, made sure it splattered deep on books, on binders, on the sketch pad she always carried like it was worth more than gold. Then he closed the locker and walked away, whistling. A few students saw. One girl gasped. A younger boy froze, unsure if it was a prank or something darker. Nobody stepped in. Zariah approached her locker 20 minutes later. She didn't hesitate, didn't look around to see who was watching. She opened the door. Blue poured out like a wave. Pages stuck together, paper pulp sagged. Charcoal smears swam in the wreckage of her work. Her sketchbook, soaked and ruined, hung at an angle like a wounded thing. She reached in, lifted it gently, held it for a moment, paint dripping from the corners, and then she did something that silenced the entire hallway. She closed the locker, turned, and walked away. No scream, no tears, not a word. The silence she left behind was heavier than any scream could have been. A few students shifted uncomfortably. Someone muttered, "That's messed up," but didn't say it loud enough for anyone else to hear. Even Chase, watching from around the corner, felt it. Not triumph, not satisfaction, something colder, like maybe he hadn't just ruined her sketchbook, maybe he'd awakened something he didn't understand. Zariah walked to the restroom, washed the paint off her hands, rinsed the edge of her sleeve. Then she looked in the mirror, calm, focused, unshaken. She didn't look broken. She looked ready. Because there are 2 kinds of silence, the kind that hides fear, and the kind that waits for the perfect moment to be heard. Zariah wasn't afraid. She was waiting. The summons came quietly. Second period. A pink slip folded in half, delivered by a student aide with eyes that flicked quickly away when handing it over. Zariah read it once, tucked it into her sketchbook, and stood. The hallway to the guidance counselor's office was empty, too early for drama, too late for curiosity. When she knocked, the door opened like it had been expecting her all morning. "Zariah," Mrs. Clay said, gesturing to a cushioned chair across from her desk. "Thanks for coming." Zariah nodded once, sat without speaking. Her hands folded gently over her notebook, one corner still stained faintly blue. Mrs. Clay was kind in the way adults who see too much try to be. Soft voice, framed degrees behind her, a plant that was somehow still alive. She clicked her pen twice before speaking again. "So, I wanted to check in." Zariah said nothing. "You've been here a few weeks now, and I've heard a few things about some interactions, specifically with Chase Bennett." Still nothing, just Zariah's eyes, calm, alert, watching like someone used to waiting for the full story before choosing where to stand. Mrs. Clay cleared her throat. "Look, if something happened, or is happening, we take that seriously here. You don't have to go through that alone." Zariah tilted her head, thoughtful. "I'm not alone," she said simply. Mrs. Clay leaned in slightly. "Then can you help me understand why you haven't filed anything formal, told a teacher, even mentioned it?" Zariah paused, not because she was unsure, but because she was choosing the exact shape of her words. Then she said, in a tone that held more weight than volume, "Some things speak louder than others." Mrs. Clay blinked, scribbled something in her notes. She was good at her job, but she couldn't quite wrap her mind around the girl sitting in front of her, too poised, too silent, too prepared. "You're remarkably composed," she said finally. "Most students wouldn't be." Zariah nodded once. "Most students aren't me." The session ended quietly, no paperwork, no declarations. But as Zariah left the room, Mrs. Clay found herself staring at the closed door a moment too long. Something told her this wasn't the end of the story, it was the beginning. The cafeteria at Westbrook was a show, a runway disguised as a food court, noise, movement, status, served hot with vegan sliders and bottled water from Iceland. Zariah always sat in the same place. Third table from the back, facing the window, alone, sketchbook open, headphones in, not playing music, just blocking the noise. But that day, Chase came with a mission and a bottle of grape soda. He didn't walk, he performed. Swagger down the center aisle, friends trailing behind like backup dancers. A smirk already forming as he veered toward her table. Zariah didn't flinch, didn't look up, just kept shading the outline of something. A figure standing alone in a thunderstorm. "Hey, artist," Chase said, voice dripping with casual cruelty. "You forget we have a dress code for behavior too?" No response. He stepped closer. "Maybe you should sketch some friends instead of whatever emo mess that is." Still silence. So he did it. Uncapped the soda, held it high, then tipped it. The splash hit her tray, her notebook, her lap. The sound it made was soft. The silence that followed wasn't. It spread like a shockwave. Laughter, short, sharp, unsure, rippled from nearby tables. A few gasped. One girl whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Zariah stood slowly, her clothes soaked, her sketchbook dripping, her expression unchanged. And then, for the first time, she looked him in the eyes. Not like a victim, not like a challenge, like someone who already knew the ending. "You should be careful who you disrespect," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut clean. "You never know who's watching." The words landed like thunder in a dry sky. Chase blinked, then laughed, scoffing like it was all a joke. "Yeah? Who's watching exactly? Your imaginary boyfriend?" A few people laughed again, but not as loud, not as real. Zariah didn't respond. She just wiped her hands, picked up her soaked sketchbook, and walked out of the cafeteria like the storm wasn't behind her. It was ahead. And Chase, who thought he'd won, didn't realize. She'd just drawn the line, and everyone else had just watched him cross it. Westbrook was built on whispers. Rumors didn't just travel fast, they hovered, floated through locker rows like perfume. If something interesting happened before lunch, it would be legend by seventh period. And after the lunchroom incident, Zariah wasn't just the new girl anymore. She was something else, something no one could quite define. She didn't even cry. She just walked away, I heard she's got connections. What kind of connections? The serious kind. No one had facts, just fragments. But fragments are all you need to build a myth. One teacher, a substitute who forgot that walls have ears, let something slip while printing a roster in the staff lounge. Isn't that the Washington kid? Wait, like Denzel Washington? The teacher paused, realized too late, didn't answer, but it was too late. By the end of the day, Zariah wasn't just mysterious, she was interesting. But Chase wasn't buying it, not for a second. He saw the shift, how people stopped laughing at his jokes when she walked by, how eyes lingered on her a beat longer. He hated it, so he did what people like Chase do when they start to lose control. He tried to humiliate her louder. That night, he posted a photo to his story, a crude, photoshopped version of one of Zariah's drawings. The soldier she'd sketched, helmet tilted, eyes closed, holding a folded flag, now edited with clown shoes and the words, "Art or trash, you decide." He added a poll. His followers voted. They laughed, they commented, but something was different this time. A few replies pushed back. "Not cool, man." "She didn't do anything to you?" "Why are you so pressed?" Chase ignored them, double down mode. But even his friends were quieter the next morning, less laughter, more glances, more uncertainty. Because rumors are like matches. You don't know which spark is real until the fire's already started. And this fire? It was about to burn brighter than any of them expected. Valet parking lined the circle drive. Luxury cars glided in one by one, sleek Teslas, matte finish Range Rovers, an occasional Bentley for flair. Parents stepped out in suits and designer heels, phones in hand, greetings polished. Inside, the auditorium glowed. Staff stood near poster boards and college readiness flyers, pretending to care while trying to impress. Champagne flutes in hand, hushed bragging in corners, SAT scores, early admissions, board seats. Chase's parents arrived exactly on time. Mr. Bennett shook hands with two board members and offered an envelope to the head of school. Mrs. Bennett complimented the lighting in the auditorium like it was an art gallery. They made their rounds. Teachers smiled too hard. The Bennetts were key supporters, donors, people you catered to. And then, a quiet murmur spread near the entrance. The kind of hush that moves faster than sound, eyes turned, heads tilted, because a black SUV had just pulled up at the curb. Not flashy, not aggressive, just clean, understated, intentional. The back door opened, and out stepped Denzel Washington, no bodyguards, no entourage, just him, calm, composed, wearing a tailored gray coat and the kind of quiet presence that didn't need announcing. The moment he entered the lobby, the air changed. Teachers straightened their ties, parents nudged each other, even the head of school paused mid-conversation. Zariah walked in beside him. No fanfare, no performance, just a girl beside a father. Chase saw them from across the room. His smirk twitched, faded. "That's not real," he whispered to one of his friends. But it was. Every step, every glance, every stunned silence in that room confirmed it. Denzel didn't scan the room. He already knew where he was going. He placed a hand gently on Zariah's shoulder and said, just loud enough, "You doing okay, sweetheart?" She nodded once. He smiled. And suddenly, she wasn't just the girl with the sketchbook. She was his girl. And Chase Bennett? He had no idea how deep he'd just stepped. The moment Denzel Washington stepped into the auditorium, everything slowed down. He didn't need to speak, didn't need to introduce himself. His presence moved through the room like gravity, pulling attention, softening conversations, quieting the kind of arrogance that usually filled these nights. Some teachers recognized him immediately. Others whispered, "Is that?" "No way. I think that's really him." But Denzel didn't pause for the whispers. He walked with quiet purpose, his steps echoing lightly against the polished floor, every movement steady, controlled. No entourage, no spotlight, just intention. He bypassed the board members, walked right past the head of school, past the clusters of well-dressed parents talking about equity investments and Ivy League prep courses. And then he saw her. Zariah stood near the back, tucked between two display tables, hands still faintly stained with charcoal from the sketch she'd tucked into her bag before arriving. He didn't hesitate, didn't make a show. He simply stepped beside her and placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You doing okay, sweetheart?" The words weren't loud, but the silence that followed them was. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A plastic cup dropped and rolled across the floor. A teacher blinked like she wasn't sure if what she was seeing was real, and Chase, standing near the snack table, trying too hard to look bored, felt his stomach twist into something colder than surprise. Zariah nodded softly. Denzel gave her a quiet smile, the kind only a father can give, full of pride, full of love, full of protection. And just like that, every rumor in that school found its answer. She wasn't just someone, she was his someone. And Chase's smirk. It didn't just falter, it disappeared. Because he realized something far more terrifying than being wrong. He'd picked the wrong fight, with the wrong girl, and the wrong father was watching. The microphone was meant for announcements, honor rolls, PTA fundraisers, college prep seminars, not this. But when Denzel Washington stepped up to the podium, nobody objected, nobody moved. Even the principal stepped aside, suddenly unsure if she was still in charge of the room. He looked out across the crowd, parents, students, faculty, donors, and for a long, powerful moment, he said nothing. Then quietly, "Some of you know me as an actor." A few chuckles broke the tension, soft and nervous. "But I'm also a father." The room fell silent again. He turned slightly, gesturing toward the back of the room where Zariah stood, her expression still calm, still unreadable. "My daughter Zariah is here with me tonight." He let that hang, let it settle into the seats and echo between the beams of the ceiling. "I adopted her when she was 7 years old," he continued. "She was smart, strong, quiet, but never invisible. She didn't grow up with luxury. She grew up with lessons, with heart, with the kind of resilience this world doesn't always recognize, but desperately needs." Eyes shifted toward her now, but differently, not with confusion, with curiosity, respect, maybe even regret. "She's an artist," he said, his voice warming, "the kind that sees the world clearer than most of us. And she's kind in a world that often rewards cruelty. I've never asked her to be famous. I've only asked her to be brave." Somewhere near the front, a mother dabbed at her eyes. "I taught her that respect isn't earned with a name. It's earned by how you treat people when nobody's watching. And lately..." He paused just briefly. "I've been watching." The message was clear. No names, no finger-pointing, just truth spoken plainly. He looked back toward Zariah, pride written in every line of his face. She didn't come to this school to prove anything. She came to learn, to grow, to be left alone, to do her work, and maybe, just maybe, remind the rest of us that silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes silence means power. The applause didn't come immediately. It came slowly, respectfully, then louder, stronger. Even some of the teachers joined in. And for the first time since she'd stepped foot in Westbrook, Zariah wasn't alone at the back of the room. She was seen, and the boy who tried to silence her, he was the only one left without anything to say. The principal's office was usually a place for scholarships and strategy, not this time. Chase Bennett sat between his parents, legs bouncing, jaw tight. Mr. Bennett flipped through his phone like he had somewhere more important to be. Mrs. Bennett adjusted her scarf 3 times in 60 seconds. The silence was thick, but not because no one had spoken, because someone was waiting to. At the far end of the room sat Denzel Washington, still, silent, focused. He wasn't fuming, he wasn't accusing, he was present. And somehow, that was worse than any outburst could have been. The principal clicked a remote. A screen flickered to life. Security footage played in stuttering clarity, the paint dripping from Zariah's locker, the soda spilling across her tray, the laughter, the stares, Chase, his smirk, his swagger, his words. Mrs. Bennett's hand went to her mouth. Mr. Bennett stopped scrolling. Chase watched it all and didn't say a word, but his eyes darted, left, right, anywhere but forward. When the video ended, the silence was louder than before. The principal cleared her throat. As you can see, this behavior violates not only our code of conduct, but basic human decency. Mr. Bennett opened his mouth, but Denzel raised a hand, just slightly. He didn't shout, didn't make a speech. He simply said, "Let me be clear, this isn't about celebrity, this isn't about me." He turned his gaze to Chase. It didn't flinch. It didn't blink. "This is about character, yours, Heron, this school's." He paused. "And who you all become when you think no one's watching." Chase looked down, not from shame, from fear, because deep down he knew. He'd just been seen for the first time, and it wasn't the version of himself he wanted the world to remember. The following morning, the school gathered in the auditorium, again. But this time there were no banners, no smiling teachers, just tension, raw and unscripted. Everyone had heard, everyone knew. Even those who pretended not to care leaned forward in their seats. Chase walked to the front of the room like someone who had been told to walk the plank. Behind him, Zariah sat motionless in the second row. She didn't need to speak. She had spoken, through her silence, her art, her presence. Now, the spotlight was his, and it wasn't kind. Chase cleared his throat into the mic. "So, I just want to say," he scratched his neck, looked toward the back. "I'm sorry if anyone felt disrespected." Someone in the front snorted. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," he added, voice flat. "It was just a joke." The words landed like marbles on tile, rolling, hollow. Zariah looked up. No anger, no contempt, just the kind of clarity that came from surviving something. She stood, calmly, walked to the stage. Then, without raising her voice, she said, "I don't want your apology." The room held its breath. "I want you to understand what it cost you." Chase stared. Zariah turned toward the crowd, not for attention, but for truth. "This school watched it happen. A lot of you laughed. Some of you stayed quiet. He didn't act alone." No one moved. But what he lost was bigger than popularity. She looked back at Chase, her voice steady. "You lost who you could have been." Then she turned and walked back to her seat. And that silence? It was louder than any applause could have been. There was no assembly, no final speech. Just a notice slipped into first period inboxes. Chase Bennett, suspended indefinitely. The words were cold, precise, empty of the protection that once followed his name like a shadow. Within 24 hours, things fell apart. The scholarship, gone. The early acceptance letter from Stanford, rescinded. The local sports recruiters stopped calling. Their silence said more than their emails ever did. Even his Instagram, once filled with likes, fire emojis, inside jokes, went quiet. He posted a photo of himself at the gym. No one cared. He posted a screenshot of an old game win. Still nothing. Then the comments started, "Not so funny now, huh? Karma's undefeated. You deserved worse." The people who once sat at his lunch table now avoided eye contact. His friends started posting without tagging him. When he walked down the hallway, conversations paused, not to welcome him, but to watch him pass. The worst part? No one was chasing him anymore, because there was nothing left to chase. He sat in the empty stands of the football field after school, scrolling through old videos, ones where he laughed too loud and talked too much. And for the first time, the silence wasn't something he controlled. It swallowed him. He used to think attention was the same thing as power, that being feared or followed meant he was doing something right. But power built on humiliation isn't power, it's sand. And Chase? He was sinking. The gallery buzzed with quiet energy. Teens in second-hand blazers stood beside paintings and sculptures, each one tagged with a name and a story. Parents held paper cups of sparkling cider. Teachers nodded with forced sophistication. In the far corner, under a soft spotlight, hung Zariah's piece, a charcoal drawing haunting in its simplicity, a faceless figure, arms outstretched, mouth open in mid-scream, crumbling into pieces. Words etched into the cracks. This is what hate sounds like when it finally echoes back. Beneath the drawing, her name. Just that. No bio, no quotes, no explanations. People didn't ask for one. They stood quietly, studied, reflected. Some recognized the inspiration, most didn't need to. Zariah stood beside it, hands folded. No fanfare, no spotlight. She didn't need it. The art spoke louder than anything she could have said. Denzel stood behind her, not in front, not above, beside her. He didn't speak, didn't need to. His pride showed in the way he watched others see her, not as his daughter, not as a headline, but as herself. An artist, a survivor, a storyteller with graphite and fire in her hands. A woman stepped up, her voice soft. "Your piece? It made me feel something." Zariah nodded once. "That's the point." Denzel smiled just slightly. Outside, the city hummed. Inside, Zariah was finally heard. Not because someone made noise for her, but because she created something too powerful to ignore. Monday morning at Westbrook felt different. The air was the same. The sun still caught the tops of the manicured hedges. The fountain still bubbled at its perfect rhythm, but something had shifted. Zariah walked through the front gates the way she always had. No entourage, no rush, no need to announce herself. Sketchbook tucked under one arm, head high, steps quiet. But the silence that met her wasn't the same as before. This time, it wasn't avoidance. It was respect. A girl near the lockers nodded. A boy in her math class moved his backpack to make room. Even a teacher, one who had once glanced past her, paused and said, "Good morning, Ms. Washington." But Zariah didn't smile because of the name. She smiled because it didn't matter anymore. They didn't nod because she was Denzel Washington's daughter. They nodded because they finally saw her. The girl who didn't shout to be heard. The girl who didn't fight fire with fire. The girl who drew truth in charcoal and stood still while the storm raged around her and outlasted it. She passed the art room and caught a glimpse of her piece hanging in the hallway now, framed in glass. No one dared touch it, but everyone paused, even Chase. He sat alone at the end of the hall, head down, the glow of a screen reflecting back at him. Fewer followers, fewer friends, and for the first time, more questions than certainty. Zariah didn't look at him with spite. She didn't need to. She'd already said everything that mattered without ever raising her voice. This story was brutal, but this story on the right-hand side is even more insane.